this is Dominic, wedding DJ.
And this is Serena, wedding planner.
And together we are the Wedding Duo. We are here to talk all things weddings.
Planning a wedding can be stressful, but we are here to help.
So before you say, that's it, we're going to Vegas, don't go to Vegas.
Let's have some fun.
Join us as we answer your wedding questions and help navigate planning one of the biggest days of your life with the Wedding Duo. Hello, everyone out there in the wedding world.
We are back for episode, we can't remember the number, but
20-somethings.
20-something. And we are so excited today. And I say that every time just because we are excited about our podcast, but we have a really fun, really meaningful episode. We had a guest on not too long ago talking about officiating ceremonies, right? And so we thought that episode was just so helpful, so useful to our listeners that we wanted to continue the conversation. And so we have brought another expert on.
We said we needed a Victoria. That's what we needed.
We needed a Victoria. And so we found one. And today we have Victoria Wick. She is here with us to discuss, there's going to be a couple things discussed. We're going to talk about some myths about officiating your ceremony and making it meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second portion is going to be
helpful tips for the DIY officiant.
Exactly. So introduce yourself, Victoria. Tell our listeners who you are and what you're all about.
Hi, everyone. Yes, it is so good to be with you today. My name is Victoria Wick. I am a super fan of this podcast. I'm 1 year into the wedding industry myself. And so Dominic and Serena have been my helpful guides through all of it because this is a different world for me. I came to officiating and now wedding ceremony coaching by way of being a progressive Christian pastor. So I got my education there. I went to grad school to learn how to officiate weddings, did it through the church, and decided I wanted something different. So I founded a business called Something New Ceremonies. And my mission is to help couples design the ceremonies of their dreams, especially if they want a friend or family member to officiate. I think it's amazing when people add that kind of personal touch to their ceremonies. And there just aren't that many resources out there to know how to do a really good job of it. It's a ton of work. And I want to make that much more accessible to people by helping them write every word of their ceremony scripts, write their vows if they need it, coach their officiant, and navigate all of the parts of that marriage license process, which can differ by county. So I know it can all be really overwhelming, but by taking some intentional time to plan your ceremony, it can help enrich the entire wedding planning process and turn it from something that could have been stressful into something that will even deepen your connection and make your wedding day all the more memorable.
It is I think initially they're like, oh, just have Billy do it. And they're like, yeah, he'll do it. And then you're like, okay, but what does that
mean?
It's still, there's a legal side to it. There's
Yes.
the performance side to it. There's the emotional side to it.
Mm-hmm.
So picking the person, I feel like that's a big part, right?
It absolutely is. And that is something that, if you're a couple out there and you're thinking about having a friend or family member officiate the ceremony, consider those pieces. Consider the fact that they're going to have to be up in front of, maybe 100 people. They're going to be comfortable speaking. Also, you're going to want to consider exactly what Victoria was talking about, like what is being said, have someone, maybe a resource like Victoria or, there's other resources out there, but help you personalize that ceremony.
Well, let's take one step back real quick. So what we're talking about, the officiant is the person that's doing the ceremony, a male or female. Some people have their priest or their pastor do it. Some people have a professional officiant. There are companies that have people that do it for a living. And then there's the other one where it's like someone your brother-in-law, your friend, person that introduced you. We had the father of the groom did this past Sunday. He got ordained, and you can go online and you can become an ordained minister or officiant or whatever it is. Not minister, officiant. I did it because somebody said, oh, we want you to do the wedding. And I was like, oh, I'll be there for music and microphones. They were like, no, we want you to do the ceremony. I go, you want me to I'm going to summon it? I go, okay. So I got a little badge. It says clergy on it, which I thought is hysterical.
So
I like to wear it around the office sometimes. I asked Serena to refer to me as the honorable DJ Dominic, but that didn't take. So.
No, we're not doing that.
Oh, that's really cool. So and how confusing that process can be and overwhelming.
Yes.
I'm very comfortable in front of a crowd. And I've done 1,000 weddings, but it was still a different spot that I was in. So it was still, I felt it was a little bit daunting myself. And like I said, I live in the wedding world and I have seen 1,000 weddings, and it was still, I was like, okay, wait a minute, this is a different angle. So I have the utmost appreciation for the person that is asked to step in front of the crowd and do the ceremony.
Yeah. So Victoria, tell us, maybe we'll start with that. Let's start with, what is important and what can people do to prepare themselves if they are not a professional, to do the ceremony for the couple?
I love that question so much. And just from my own experience of having these frantic officiants come to me, I would first just encourage them, go to the couple who asked you. I think people feel this pressure that they have to do this really big job because it is an extremely big job that requires a lot of training, that they might stress out their friends who are planning a wedding by saying, I actually have no idea how to do this and I'm afraid of disappointing you, which is how friends have come to me and asked me for advice. But I think you can get a lot just from having a sit-down conversation with this couple and asking them why they chose you. Because I think in a lot of instances, people end up choosing a sibling or like a fun friend. I think it's really sweet that often it's not people's closest friends, but often ones that they have maybe a special kind of playful relationship with, who can speak to different aspects of their relationship during the ceremony. And I think it would be empowering to these first-time officiants if they heard that from the couples, that it's not that this couple thinks that you are their friend that's most capable of researching how to become an officiant, but that they want your personality to shine through their ceremony. And that's what you've got to focus on. And then also what I want to try and teach couples too is like, it's really on them to do the rest of it, to make sure that they make the choices where they have the ceremony that they want. Because it's a lot to put it on a friend to anticipate what might be meaningful to you on your day. So I know there aren't a whole lot of resources out there to help people know what exactly that looks like and how to even begin having those conversations, which is why I'm trying to help couples out.
Yeah. And I think it is so important and so helpful what you're doing, honestly, because we've had couples come to us and just feel completely overwhelmed, completely lost as to the ceremony portion, especially maybe they don't want a religious ceremony. Okay. For example, right? So there's not a lot of structure, for them, readings from the Bible. They don't even know what to add to give it substance. Right. So, those pieces can be very challenging. What do you suggest in that case? Like, are there good parts that you found that are helpful in adding substance to a ceremony if it's not necessarily like a religious ceremony?
If they don't want Corinthians 13, 1 through 13.
Yes, I'm sure you both have heard that reading probably 1,000 times by now. That's so funny. Yeah, I think that's such a good question. And I think people don't know where they have options because they don't know what the actual necessary parts of a ceremony are. But as you both know, there's very little that actually has to happen in a ceremony. You have to say you want to get married and you have to be pronounced married. And everything else is totally up to you. And so what I encourage people to think about is think about why those traditional pieces are in a ceremony. So I love that you mentioned that classic Corinthians reading.
Just for I don't want to make it feel like I'm hating on it because it's very fitting. It's a lovely reading, but it's just the one that if people want a Bible verse, that's like that's the big hitter for sure.
Totally. Yes. You don't want your guests zoning out because they've heard it a million times.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Yeah. And I think there are just like so many other options. What I encourage couples to think about is to pick something that they find beautiful, whatever that is. If that's, a quote from a favorite TV show, if that's a song that's meant something to them, that they can just play from an iPod or something, or if it's a movie clip, anything that for them might even be like an inside joke, something they quote to each other all the time, something that has made itself into the fabric of their relationship. And that can be anything. It really doesn't have to be scripture. It really doesn't have to be spiritual in any sense. It can just be something that is special to you or that you find beautiful.
I love that.
I don't know. I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but one of the things I always suggest, even if it is a religious ceremony, is the hand poem, because it's just such a pretty. The hand is in waving with your hand. If you want to look it up, and it doesn't even need to be like. I've had people that just incorporate it in. They say grab each other's hands, and they roll into this poem that says like these are the hands that'll reach for yours when you're old and gray. They'll wipe away your tears when you're sad.
Mm-hmm.
They'll hold your children, and it's a beautiful poem. But they don't need to say like, and now I'm going to read the hand poem. It doesn't need to be that formal. Just say they'll grab your hands and they'll just roll into it. But it is It is a beautiful addition if you're looking for some substance, like Serena said, but that's not necessarily religious, just pretty. It's just a pretty poem.
Yes,
I like it.
Absolutely.
Have you heard it? Do you know it?
Yes, that's such a great recommendation. I love it so much.
Awesome. So I want to make sure we cover the topics that we are here to discuss. So let's start with the 7 myths that you said about having a meaningful ceremony. So I know you have some knowledge to share, and I want to make sure we get to that.
I'm excited to hear these.
Yes, me too.
Because we don't know. We don't know. This is all new.
Oh, I'm so excited to share with you. Yeah, please feel free to jump in with your own ideas and insights. I'm so eager to hear. But I wanted to share this with your listeners, partly because I feel like now that couples are getting a little bit of freedom to create their own ceremonies, there are all these ideas out there about the things you have to do in order for it to really mean something. And spoiler alert, I think all of these things are wrong. Whenever something says you have to do it this way, I think that we should be a little bit suspicious of that because there's no one thing that works for everyone. You both are always saying this. I think the more that we can have choices about how we plan our weddings, the better. And so anyone that's telling you that you should do it one way is probably wrong. So these, I think, are the 7 main myths when it comes to the things people say about what really makes a ceremony meaningful. And the number 1 myth, I think, is that you need to have an experienced officiant. That's why I'm in this business in the first place. Unfortunately, it kind of has been the case for a long time that you need to have an experienced officiant in order to have a wedding, because that has been the domain of pastors and priests for so very long. But the internet largely has made this option accessible to people for the first time because you can get ordained online and you can research how to put together a bit of a ceremony script and figure out how to do it. But we still don't have, as we've been saying before, like those robust resources that make it easy for someone to really pick up the officiating role. And so that's really why I want to step in and help. There's nothing essential about being a professional officiant or minister. It's just that professional officiants and ministers have kind of kept a tight hold on this information for a long time. And it's a lot to pick up in the course of a couple of months.
Yeah, we were talking about this before we started, but I did a TikTok on it a while back and said, did you know if you can have like your friend do the ceremony? And boy, did I hear from the officiants out there like, oh, how dare you say they need it's not even legit. And I go, wow, okay. Because I know as a DJ, I'm oftentimes competing with with the uncle with an iPod. You know, the photographers are competing with Aunt Betty, who took a photography class in college. There's always somebody close to you that
could potentially,
because things get expensive. Newsflash to the brides out there. It gets expensive really fast. And that's another person that you would not necessarily have to pay for. That's another factor is like the budget, right?
It is.
And there's usually somebody in the family that can do something that can contribute to whether it's the catering or the photographer, but you too, officiants, like, I mean, if you get hired, that's fantastic. We all looking to do this, but it's like we said, it's another option. It's another.
It is an option, and it is an option that is realistic for a lot of couples.
Yeah.
And we should mention this is usually done outside of the church. It doesn't usually happen where
Uncle Charlie's not walking down the aisle in the cathedral.
Probably not. So if you're having your ceremony, in a church, you do normally use a priest or the, minister there. So we are talking about outside ceremony. But let's continue on. I want to hear number 2. Are we ready?
Yes. Myth number 2 is that your wedding has to be serious. Now, I think couples are getting this one a little bit more. We're seeing playfulness in so many ways, but I think there's been this long-standing idea that you have to have heartfelt words that have a certain kind of tone in order for them to be sincere, but that's just not the way that a lot of people's relationships work. And so I think the more that people can encourage themselves that they don't have to be funny. If they don't want their wedding to be funny, they don't have to fit in jokes somewhere. But if they feel like being playful and silly, that's amazing. That's a wonderful thing to do. I'm seeing on social media these days a lot of flower girls being replaced with beer boys. I think that's the latest expression of this I've seen, where adult men go down the aisle and hand out beers. And I love that. It's goofy and it sets a light tone, and that can be exactly what you need on your wedding day.
And that little giggle at the beginning, because people are so wound up tight at the beginning of the ceremony, because 18 months of planning has all gone down, and here we are. This is when it begins, right? And so just one little giggle, even if you get up front and the officiant would say, "Are we ready? Here it is." And then just kind of go, "Yes." It's just kind of like that little bit of a, okay, yeah, like catch your breath, just one little chuckle. And it doesn't need to be, like you said, it doesn't need to be humor.
Unless you want to.
I mean, I'm a big fan of the humor, but just something that just kind of goes, okay, here we go. Are you ready? Just something simple as that can just lighten the mood.
It presses the release button. You can almost feel it. It's like palpable. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Everyone's just takes a breath and says, okay, we're here. This is exciting. This is wonderful. So,
and what I always say, like, once you get down the aisle and you finally started, it is a release because nothing can be changed. There's no other decisions to be made. So you can almost have your officiant say, like, that's it. You can't change your centerpieces anymore. And the bride will be like, okay, thank God, right? Like,
it's true.
Pinterest can't hurt you now.
Really love that. I'm going to use that. That's really beautiful. I love that.
All right. So do we have number 3? Are we on 3? Yes.
I'm a big fan of number 2, by the way. Number 2 has been my
favorite.
Number
2 is our favorite so far.
Oh, I'm glad. Tell me how you think of myth number 3. Myth number 3 is that your wedding should be timeless. Now, I want to clarify this because I'm not the kind of person who says that your wedding should or shouldn't be anything, except when it comes to being timeless. I think your wedding should not be timeless. That's the only thing it shouldn't be. And I think we have this sensibility culturally that you'll want to be able to look at your wedding pictures 10 or 20 years from now and still think that it looks good. Like you'd make the same aesthetic choices 10 or 20 years from now. And I think that's a silly way to plan a wedding.
Yeah.
I think the cool thing about a wedding is that it is so rooted in a time and a place. It is this moment of your relationship. And there's nothing you can do to try to anticipate the decades of your relationship that will come and be down the road. So why try to do that in your ceremony? You can have a really dated wedding ceremony. There can be references from your latest binge Netflix show and your current favorite music artists. Actually, Dominic, I was thinking about you because I think that people get this idea for their weddings when it comes to planning their playlists, maybe because it's not immortalized in photos, but people know that their playlists don't have to be timeless. Like they should be amazing for right now. And that's true for every part of your wedding. If people are going to have a fun time and it's going to be a true expression of who you are, it's got to be based on now.
Yeah.
I say it all the time. Like you've got 4 generations at the wedding. And there's often times where, because I'm training a new guy right now, and I want him to understand, like, we're not in the club, right? We're not just catering to the 20-something-year-olds because you've got the flower girl and grandma and everybody in between. We want to get dancing, but there's songs that I was playing, I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. And all the bridesmaids out there like, go on now, go, walk out the door, right? And then later I played Good For You by Olivia Rodrigo, excuse me. And she's like, today's version of that same song, right? Like, good for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was the same girl singing it with just as much enthusiasm. But it was just like funny to me. That's like, those are 2 very similar songs. And again, people sometimes get on me about, you play that at a wedding? I go, not during dinner. I'm very cognizant of my lyrics during cocktail hour, during dinner. But once we open the dance floor, back in the day when I played Gold Digger, it wasn't a shout out to the bride. It was just a dance song.
Right.
Once we start dancing, it's like the gloves come off. I know we're off track now. So let me shut up. But you mentioned music and I'm like, yeah, music.
He's like, I must talk about music.
Dominic, pump the brakes, Dominic.
So I love the reference to that because I think if I look back at our wedding photos, which we don't have because we were married at a courthouse, but if I were to.
Oh, you have wedding photos.
We do?
It's just not with.
Oh, I have. Yes, of my first wedding, but we're not going to talk about that.
I have some too, and they weren't with her, but eventually we'll have our wedding photos together.
We will, absolutely. But to say that,
hey, let me just clarify: we're remarried to each other now.
Yes,
but we had a swing and a
miss.
Our listeners
know that.
Maybe we have a first-time listener, and they're like, "Wait, what is going on with those 2?"
So I think it's important, just as you mentioned, to look back at your wedding photos and remember the moment, right? And maybe even be able to just go back in time mentally to that time and place. And that means, whatever it means, right? It means, do you remember that song that we had playing, for our solo dance, that was popular back in 2000? I totally relate to what you're saying. Absolutely.
But the first thing I thought was the big shoulders of the butt bow. I'm sure some of the mothers of the bride are out there like, oh my God, you should see the big hair,
yes,
puffy shoulders, and the butt bow.
The bow has come back a little bit.
It has come back.
Yeah, it's iconic. In looking back on these photos, I want to see how dated they look. That's the fun of it.
I totally agree.
It was a different time.
It was. So let's go to number 4.
Yes. Myth number 4, that you need to have live music at your ceremony. Dominic, I hope you're on board with this one too. But I think like so many of our ideas about what a wedding ceremony should be are shaped by TV and movies, where inevitably there's a string quartet or a harpist, and it's a really nice ambiance. And honestly, nothing against those musicians. I love live music. I think it's incredible. But it might not be what you want, and that's okay. You might want the exact live concert version of your favorite song, and so do that.
Yes.
I think it's been amazing, Dominic, how you've been playing processional clips for people too, because you should have the exact 30 seconds of the song you want for your processional or for whichever part of your ceremony. There's no reason not to do that.
Yeah, I love when there's live musicians, but the thing sometimes when they think about the ceremony, this pertains to the ceremony, they'll be like, oh, we don't need the DJ for the ceremony because we have a string quartet, we have a harpist, we have a pianist, whatever it is. And I'm like, how many people? And they go, oh, we got about 175 guests. And I go, outside? I go, have you been to a wedding where you're in the third row without any microphones? And you're like, I can't hear anything. And you're like, just smile and nod. Because the DJ usually brings microphones as well. So, and again, I love when there's live musicians, but it can be expensive. And then if you need the DJ in addition to that, sometimes it's like, well, I can do the music and the mics. But again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to talk you out of live musicians. But you're right. It's everyone's different vision. And you're trying to navigate between the vision and the budget, right? Those are the parameters.
And I think too, sometimes you need to look at where you're having the ceremony. If you're going to have live musicians, this is a reality check for people. If you don't have amplification and you have, let's say, like a solo violinist or a harpist, and it's windy, you may not be able to hear that music. In all honesty, like we've had that experience, right? So those are just some factors to consider. And I'm glad you bring this up, because live musicians are gorgeous. They're wonderful. We had them just on Sunday and they were phenomenal. But there's a lot of pieces, a lot of choices you have.
The groomsman sang too. He like stepped out of line and sang one of the things. I was like, oh my goodness. It was good.
I mean,
oh yeah.
Like did not need a mic. He did not need a mic.
No, that's for sure.
No.
And for anyone watching on YouTube, I just spilled coffee on my shirt.
Nice.
I thought I'd add that in so it doesn't look like I'm a slob. So real quick on the microphone thing, because some people, if you're in a chapel and there's good acoustics, you may not need microphones. And so maybe you have a live musician or musicians and you might not need the DJ at all. But if you're outside, and somebody like Serena said, and if your proximity to road noise, if it's windy, or if there's just some background whatever noise, that may be another reason to get mics. But the big thing that I always say is, are you doing repeat after me, or are you doing personal vows? If it's repeat after me, they'll know what you're saying because you're repeating after him or her that's doing the ceremony. But if it's personal vows, it's hard to project. You're not doing a PowerPoint presentation. These are very powerful words. You take out your little book and you're like, Jennifer, I knew from the first moment I saw, and you're looking down,
yes.
Some people get a bit squeaky and then you can't. And if there's no amplification, people are like in the third row, like, oh my God, whatever he's saying looks really emotional, but I have no idea what they're saying.
Yes.
And it makes me sad.
It makes me sad too.
It's definitely something we've experienced and something we want our listeners to think about. And now we're going to move on to number.
I know I keep rambling.
It's okay. We've all listened to this podcast. We know what happens with Dominic rambling. Number 5, right?
Yes, that was the perfect segue to number 5, because myth number 5 is that you have to write your own vows in order to have a meaningful ceremony. Honestly, I hear this one from officiants all the time and vow coaches, that you have to write your own vows. They have to come from the heart, be in your own words in order for them to be meaningful. Even if you're not a writer, even if that's not how you express your love with your partner, or even if it is, maybe it feels too intimate to share in front of all of these guests publicly. So I think there are so many ways to have meaningful vows. I mean, honestly, we have an entire greeting card industry thriving on the idea that it can be meaningful, the words of someone that someone else has written. I don't know how we forget that when it comes to writing vows, but it can be just as meaningful for someone to choose to share vows, maybe that their parents shared for their wedding, or if they've even just found something online. Exactly. Yeah, if they found something that captured it perfectly and they couldn't say it better themselves, then who am I to say that it would be better if they were able to wring that out of their own minds? Like it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't think vows need to be a surprise. If you want to collaborate with them with your partner, I think that's wonderful. If you want them to be a surprise, that's fine too. But I think it also makes sense to talk with your partner about what you're promising each other before the day actually comes. There are plenty of ways to do it.
I love that. And I think that for our listeners, take that pressure off yourself, right? If that is something you are terrified about, right? Or you're really feeling anxiety, take some of this advice and really internalize it.
What else do people do?
Well, they can also you can honestly write your own vows. You can say them to each other privately in a private moment before the ceremony, have that moment photographed so you're not in front of everyone. You can write your own vows and have the officiate say them, right? So that you're not speaking in front of everyone. Or you can, just as Victoria said, use words that really represent how you feel, and they don't have to be something you've written. So,
or like you said, with the gift, with the card, I've had people that like the videographer goes and the photographer goes while the groom opens the card from the bride, like right before we start, and there's her vows. Basically, that's like that's from the heart. Because she can't say it. So I can write it down to you and give it to you, but I can't say it. It's just too much. It's a big ask, especially can't say it in front of 200 people, family and friends. So you can exchange vows written to each other and then go up and just do I take you? Do you take me? But you can also bring in personal stuff. Like you said, write down some personal stuff and say, till death do us part. Do you promise to walk peaches after dinner every night? And you're like, yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
Put little fun things in your vows, because like I said, the vow police are not going to show up and be like, hey, that's not allowed. That doesn't happen.
No vow
police. Put the pretty vows in there. I promise to do the dishes after you cook.
Yep.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
It is good. This is all really good stuff. And so I'm excited to hear number 6.
Yes. Myth number 6, that your officiant needs to have wise words of advice for your marriage. I say this because I think first-time officiants, because they've been to probably some bad weddings or badly officiated weddings, or pastors and priests, because they're the worst about this, give some cringy advice about what it means to be married, especially the ones that haven't been married before. It's very weird. Or about like gender norms. It can be really uncomfortable to sit through those kinds of weddings. And I think there's this pressure that you have to be able to talk about the meaning of marriage or give wise counsel to this couple as they embark upon this new chapter of their lives. But I'm here to tell all officiants, first-time officiants included, but all officiants, that you don't need to have anything profound to say in your message on marriage. That's the generic way I refer to it. Pastors call it the sermon or homily, but a message on marriage can be as short as 6 minutes. And what I tell first-time officiants is that it should try to do 2 things. One, you should try to talk about how this couple has been changed by their love for one another. Ask them this, use their words, tell the story back to them. And 2, what can all of us learn about the way that these 2 people love each other? What can we learn about love and the ways that human beings can be there for one another? That's all you have to do. I'm sure you could go on for way longer than 6 minutes, but you only have to do 6 to 8 or 6 to 10. So keep it simple on yourselves, and it can be easier than it looks. Just don't make it harder than it has to be.
I mean, I think we don't even need to say anything to that. That was perfect.
Preach on, girl. Yeah. Preach on. That is, yeah. Oh my gosh. Because there's sometimes where I mean, people are there to celebrate the love for these 2 and then to get to the party, right? But you're right. Sometimes, good Lord, it's like we're 25 minutes in and he hasn't stopped talking. I go, stop, get to the vows, exchange rings, get to the party. Like no one came here to hear you pontificate about all the stuff. And I'm like, unless they ask for it.
Yes. Unless that is part of what you want done and what you feel comfortable with. But if you are listening out there and you're agreeing with what we're saying, make sure that doesn't happen, because it could happen if you don't give direction, right? If you don't involve yourself in what is going to be said, your officiant may feel, just as Victoria mentioned, this pressure to get up there and do that. So you will make sure that you have your say in what is going on in the ceremony.
Do you talk about, as one of your myths, the length? Are you going to talk about that? I don't want to take your time.
We only have one more left.
No, but yes, you're right about that. That should be on the list. Yeah, it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be long at all. You can have a really short ceremony that's amazing.
To what you just said, you can say like, we're hoping for probably 15 minutes. And depending on the person, that could turn into 10 minutes. It could turn into 20 minutes. But tell him, if it goes a half hour, I'm going to punch you in the face and walk off the altar, right? Like, because it will, if you don't give that guidance and say, I listen, it's going to be hot or it's going to be cold, or, people are going to be in the direct sun. Get me out of there in 15 minutes, right?
If that's what you want. Exactly. Yes.
If you want a full mass outside of the thing, I mean, the Catholicism has some rules on where you can do it or whatever, but people have had a full-on hour ceremony outside in the sun, and sometimes I'm like, okay, I hope my batteries last on my microphone, but...
Yes, for sure. All right. Are we at 7?
Yeah, here we are. The final myth is you have to have something old, something new, something borrowed, or something blue, or really anything that anyone has done before. I am just here to tell you that you don't have to do any traditions if you don't want to do them. I think it's amazing that people can choose now and have way more options. And I love about traditions that they are always able to tell a bit of a deeper story than words alone can tell. But you can tell whatever story about your relationship you want to tell. And I think it's a really exciting moment to be planning a wedding or to be a wedding vendor, because there are all of these exciting couples who are making it possible for the wedding industry to expand and have all of these creative ideas, because couples are wanting something new. And so I'm really excited to see how couples are going to lead us in many new directions and push the envelope and what it is they want for a wedding of their dreams.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic. And we've seen over the years, because we've been doing this a little bit of time, those things evolve. To your point, I have had brides ask me, what am I supposed to do for my something blue? Like they feel like they have to like check that box, right? In order for the wedding to go on. And I'm like, you don't really have to have anything, right? But don't feel that pressure that somehow your wedding is going to be less than because you didn't have one of these traditions. If it's not meaningful to you, I will say sometimes there's pressure from parents. Grandparents, No. So I get that, right? I get that if your mom is out there and that's what she did at her wedding. And so then you want to, replicate that in some way. That is completely understandable and fine. But we're also here to tell you that if you really don't see a reason for it, or it doesn't speak to you, that there's no rules.
And it depends on your relationship with these people too, because there's cultural stuff, there's religious stuff, and then there's family traditional stuff. And you don't need to do any of them. But then some of it, like, you can almost say like, okay, mom, lay it out. What do you got? And then it's like, I like that one. I like that one. But for the love of God, please don't make me do whatever that one is. You know, my favorite something blue though?
Okay, go ahead.
We had a bride, and she's close to us because she babysits our kids to this day. She has 2 little babies, but she cut out a heart out of her dad's dress blue uniform, right? The shirt, the undershirt. So it was like that blue, that Air Force blue. And she had it sewn into her back of her dress. So she had this heart-shaped blue thing in the back of her dress. And some of the brides out there are just like, she cut her dress? Like, yes.
She did.
Get past that part first. So she had this sewn into the back of her dress. And as she was dancing, and she had her hair down. Mm-hmm. But like at one point she had her hair, I'm like, what is in the back of her? And I went up later and she goes, oh, that's from my dad's dress blue. And he was there.
Right.
It wasn't like he'd passed away, but she just wanted to bring in, because he was a retired Air Force veteran.
And they were very close.
And I was like, what a creative idea. And I'm like, you people out there in the world get so creative.
They do.
It's I'm always impressed when I see something like, I've never seen that before.
And they give us a lot of TikTok opportunities.
Yeah.
We love it. Because that's what we do our videos on most.
Wow.
Isn't that fun?
That is so cool. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that idea. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a good thing he was in the Air Force, not the Army, because then nobody says something green.
Or something camouflage or whatever. Yeah.
They don't wear we have dress uniforms also.
Okay. We're not going to talk about the military. But now we're going to move on to the second portion, right? So you also had some other advice to share. So let's get started with that.
Yes, I want to share with your listeners 4 super simple ways to go above and beyond as a first-time officiant. I know there's a lot to research and a lot to learn, but I want to give you some easy and quick ways that you can take your officiating to an entirely new level. Now, the first one is going to seem a little obvious, but I promise you it's worth saying. Number 1, don't get drunk before the ceremony. It'll be tempting. You'll be nervous. You'll want to loosen up this way. And I just want to tell you, it's good to relax before the ceremony. Take some nerves off however you need to, but you're going to want to do it in a way that doesn't impair your judgment or your motor skills. That's my professional opinion. You can have a drink as soon as the ceremony is over, but just don't get drunk before the ceremony and everything will be better for it. That's your easy tip, number 1. Number 2 is step away from the kiss. So before you invite the couple to kiss one another, you're going to want to step out of the frame so that they can get that amazing shot. The photographer is going to be so happy, and they're going to be happy to be able to look back on that photo and not have someone right in between their heads. But I'm going to warn you, don't try and step away after you've already invited them to kiss, because you're going to get caught in the frame. So take a full second, deep breath, step to the side behind either side of the wedding party, and then invite the couple to share a kiss, seal their promise with a kiss, whatever wording you use.
They can talk through it. They can say like, hold on, let me get out of the picture. And then say, you may now like talk through it, like, cause you're going to trip over the awning or whatever, like the
awning,
not the awning,
the arch,
the arch. You're going to trip over the arch or something. So just give it a second, say, hang on, let me get out of the picture. And then say, you may now kiss the bride. And then, yeah, I love it.
Totally. Number 3 is I want to advise you to keep the couple in the limelight after the ceremony. It's first-time officiants in particular always end up doing an amazing job, and the guests are really excited for them and will come up and compliment you and tell you what a phenomenal job you did. And I just want to remind you, you're going to be so swept away in the moment. Just remember to direct attention back to the couple. It's their special day. Just say something simple like, aren't they so easy to celebrate? Thanks so much for the compliment. And then keep on celebrating. Try not to make it about you. You can do that another time and you'll be able to reflect on it and be proud of it for the rest of your life.
Yep. That is some good words out there. Everybody hearing that? Let's just make sure.
And your 4th and final super simple tip is to follow through on the documents part of it. So the thing about being an officiant is that your job isn't done once the wedding day is over. It is actually your responsibility, whether you are an amateur first-time officiant or a professional officiant, to file that signed marriage certificate. Get that in the mail, or marriage license, whatever your county calls it. And then that gets filed. Then they're officially married. Until that happens, you've only said the parts that need to be said and signed the things that need to be said. And so don't put that on the couple to check in with you, their friend, about whether you've done this really important thing for them. Just do it immediately and send them a text and say they did. Say, hope you have a great honeymoon. Don't need to respond to this. I just wanted you to know everything's squared away. They will be so grateful for it.
This is one of the best pieces of advice I've heard on our podcast. I'm going to tell you this. And the reason is, I cannot tell you how many times as the planner, as the coordinator, I often get handed the marriage license, right? Which is fine, right? Beforehand, so that I can hold on to it and then give it to the officiant. But they will look at me like I have 2 heads. Like, what am I supposed to do with this thing? And you're right. It is a little bit of responsibility on you to research beforehand where you're supposed to mail it. There's usually instructions in the envelope, so it's not that hard. Depending on your county, you may need witnesses to sign. You may, there's a lot of pieces there, right? And so I will do it as the coordinator and the planner because, of course, I want my couple to be married. But it is nice when the officiant knows ahead of time that that is their responsibility, that they are prepared for it, and they're prepared, as you mentioned, to take it with them and take that off of the couple. Love it so much. Can't even tell you.
Oh, Serena, it's amazing you do that for your couples. Wow.
I mean, who's going to do it? Somebody has to, right? I mean, and again, it doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it just adds another level of like stress and anxiety of like running around trying to find, the people. And it just, yeah. So if it can be prepared ahead of time and everybody knows the plan.
Well, the other thing is
so much better off.
Sometimes they want to have like a picture opportunity while they're signing it with the officiant there, and then the couple and the photographer and the videographer, whomever's involved. But sometimes the officiant leaves because if it's a professional, they're usually there, do the ceremony, and they're like, they want to sign it, and then they got another one to get to or whatever they're going to do. Or if it's Uncle Charlie and they're like, he's got it all night, and he's like, please relieve me of this responsibility. I want to get it signed. And it's later in the night, and then people are drunk, and they're like, "Oh my God, we never signed the thing." And I'm like,
happens.
That's happened too, right?
Yep. So these are real wedding experiences, you guys. And if you think it might not happen to you, I get that, but it could. And so
that's why we talk through them.
That's why we talk through them, and that's why we do this, because we want you to think through these things so that you can be prepared. And Victoria, you have been amazing. I'm always impressed by our guests in the sense that like we learn something new. I mean, we've been doing this a long time, and like it is just so wonderful to hear from other professionals out there in the industry doing these kinds of good things for the industry as a whole, right? And for couples.
Well, I have learned so much from you, and today more as always. It has been such an honor to be on your show. I'm honestly geeking out a little bit that I got to talk to you. And I just can't wait to meet your guests.
So I want you to tell our listeners now where they can find more about you and what you're offering to them today.
Yes, I invite you to follow me on social media. You can follow me on Instagram at somethingnew.ceremonies. And I invite you to visit my website because that's where I have all my resources. Check out my blog. That's somethingnewceremonies.com. And for your listeners, go straight to somethingnewceremonies.com/wedding duo. I'm offering all Wedding Duo listeners 20% off all my services. So that's ceremony script writing, personalizing your vows and all that coaching your officiant, guiding you through the marriage license process. 20% off everything if you book with me before 2023. So I really, really hope to hear from some of you.
Oh, you will, I'm sure, because if you're as impressed as I am with the way you speak and your knowledge, it's wonderful. And so guys, the link to that page will be in the show notes. So it'll be easy for you guys to find, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify or Apple. Is it Apple Podcasts, Apple Music, Apple something? But
Pandora.
We want to make sure, Victoria, we didn't miss anything. Is there anything else you want to share?
Oh, we covered so much today. I would have to come on another time maybe and share more with you then. This was so much fun.
And we might just do that.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much for an amazing conversation.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're going to end the way we always do, and that's with you.
You know how we end, Victoria. We always say, which is this whole podcast. This is a great example of, because we talked about it, it's your day and you're going to get all this noise that comes in, but try to put the blinders on, talk to your significant other and say, what do we want? As opposed to what does everybody else want? What does social media want? So don't let anybody talk you into something you don't want to do or talk you out of something that you have your heart set on. It's your day. You do you. And we are going to end it with our kiss. You want to blow a kiss too? We're blowing kisses. Ready? Blowing kisses, Victoria. Ready? Mwah. So thanks for listening to our podcast. If you found any of this information helpful and you know someone who may be engaged or is a maid of honor, maybe you could tell them and share it with a friend. Absolutely. So screenshot this episode, share it on Instagram, on Facebook, and tag the Wedding Duo. We promise to share the love back. Also, if you are interested in more resources or the show notes, you can go to theweddingduo.co. We have one-on-one virtual sessions, a shop, all sorts of fun stuff. Check it out.